Ang Hao. Salam Sejahtera. Vanakkam. As you can see, I'm not a linguist. I'm not good at languages. I don't even like speaking in English.
We still love you.
I'm not a great speaker. I don't need fame. I used to appear on a business television when I ran a hedge fund. So why did I enter politics? One reason was to make politics an ordinary activity, to normalize it, to make democracy not a dirty word in Singapore. So, you could be a member of a political party with pride, openly, without fear. You could vote for a non-PAP party without being worried. I may not be a linguist, but I am an economist. I want Singapore to choose policies that are the best possible policies because they've been robustly tested. I believe in democracy. I believe that competition is just as essential in politics as it is in business. Now, the PAP think that competition is good for the likes of you and me. They say that we should let in immigrants, enormous numbers of immigrants, so lest Singaporeans become lazy and complacent. They need a spur stuck in their sides. But they don't like competition in politics. That's why the PM at the NUS forum said that competition was a drain on resources because there could only be one A team in Singapore.
I don't lie.
So we beg to disagree. I want you to think that there's nothing wrong in having 15 opposition seats in Parliament, or 20, 3 GRCs. What is that? That's not even 20% of the seats.
70%.
And as an economist, if I am in Parliament, I can debate the national issues. What is the PAP so scared of debating the issues with me? We were excluded, or I was excluded, from the Channel News Asia forum in English. I don't know the reason why, but I think it may be because they didn't want me debating with the finance minister. So I don't want to destroy anything. I want a better Singapore. So you need us in Parliament so we can scrutinize the policies. For instance, it was the Reform Party that first pointed out that the economic growth record of which the PAP are so proud is actually hollow. It's not built on working smarter or raising productivity. It's built on importing cheap labor from overseas. Something like 80% of the growth in the last 10 years has come from increasing the workforce. So what does this economic growth mean to you? Because the PAP often say that it would be wrong to miss out on this economic growth. But I don't see what it means to the ordinary man in the street. It may mean higher profits for the GLCs or higher profits for the MNCs. But to you, it likely means having to accept a lower salary, having to have a wage cut, having to work longer hours because you're competing with a foreign worker who's been brought in from a low-income country. A foreign worker who hasn't had to do national service and who doesn't have to pay CPF. And then if you lose your job, there's no unemployment benefit. So what does this mean then when they say that we need to seize this economic growth? For instance, last year they were very proud that the economy grew by 14.7%. But inflation is rising at 5% per annum, and your wages are rising by less. So what's the point of the economic growth if your wages are not even keeping up with inflation? And PM Lee said in his May Day rally that the PAP had a great record in creating jobs, but jobs for whom? They say the unemployment rate in Singapore is low, but actually, if we look at the labour force participation rates, that is the proportion of the labour force that is employed in Singapore, and we compare it with other economies with much higher unemployment rates, like the UK or the US, it seems to be around the same. So I think there are a lot of Singaporeans who want jobs, but had stopped working because the wages have become too low, or they are retraining, or they're taking jobs, part-time jobs, or jobs that they wouldn't take if they had any other resources to fall back on. And when I'm in Parliament, I will also be able to scrutinise the budgetary process and question the government on what exactly is the surplus that we make every year. The PAP are always hitting out and saying that the opposition would squander the national reserves. I don't want to squander the reserves. I want to ensure that we have adequate reserves. But what is the point at which we say we don't need to keep saving, we don't need to keep putting money away, we can invest in education and health, we can improve our infrastructure, rather than investing overseas in assets that are held in depreciating currencies. In Parliament, I can push for a health insurance policy to replace Medisave and Medicare, Medishield, which are inadequate The PAP had said recently, or Minister Lim's team had said that Singapore does very well on measures of health compared to other countries. But I had a look at some of the measures in the latest OECD survey of Asia-Pacific countries. Did you know that Singapore only has a very low level of doctors per 100,000 population, around the same level as countries like Thailand and Vietnam. Singapore also has a very low level of hospital beds. We are behind other countries in terms of treatment of diabetes. So I've been to see people in hospital who can't afford treatment for cancer because the drugs are too expensive. So we want a health insurance policy that will ensure that Singaporeans don't have to worry if they fall chronically ill and they deplete their savings. We want to push for reform of CPF so that you should be able to withdraw your CPF savings at 55. Yeah! Because that was promised. It's not a scheme over which you have had any choice. We believe that ultimately, apart from providing for medical insurance and to save for an old age pension, you should have control over your CPF savings. We would push for a minimum wage to replace the workfare scheme. And Minister Lim has criticized minimum wage and said that workfare is better. But what if, with the workfare scheme, the employer cuts the wage so that you receive the same after workfare as before workfare? A minimum wage is often, the PAP often criticize the minimum wage by saying that it will lead to higher unemployment. But if an employer is faced with the choice between a Singaporean and a foreign worker but has to pay the same wage to both, he might choose to employ a Singaporean. Yeah! Now, the Reform Party is not anti-business. We are pro-business. We are a free-market party. We're not a socialist party. So we would set minimum wage at a level which doesn't damage our businesses initially. And we would see that the money that is currently paid out in workfare was rebated back to our SMEs in the form of tax breaks. We would also push in Parliament for the reduction in national service from 2 years to 18 months, and then to 1 year. And we would also like the government to pay proper compensation to our NS men for the 2 years of employment that they have foregone. We would like to see foreigners who come here on scholarships, which are subsidized by our government, and then they stay on to work here and become PRs and then citizens. We would like to see them have to either do national service or pay a special tax to compensate. So, as I said, you need us in Parliament. You need me in Parliament because I'm an economist and I can fight for you at the national level. But the Reform Party is not just me. And we are not just here to fight for national issues. We are not just about economics. We are a team with heart. I also have an amazing team behind me.
Yeah!
A large pool of expertise to draw upon. You know us from our walkabouts. Recently, a resident in Dover Crescent said that they had seen me before in 2010 and that this was our second round. We didn't just spring up in March or April this year. We've been working the ground, we've been meeting you and hearing your problems for the past 2 years.
Yeah!
I know every local issue, whether it concerns a fishing pond or the improvement of Pandan Reservoir, or that the elderly in Telok Blangah need special access to transport facilities. I know that you need more polyclinics in West Coast. One local issue that we have already been involved in, learnt about, is the SIRS affecting the residents in Clementi in block 322 to 324. And we understand the residents there are unhappy about being forced to move, and the fact that they will, many of them elderly, they may have to come up with $40,000 to $50,000 for their new flats to bring them up to an acceptable standard. Well, the Reform Party will push for something, will push to do something about that. When we are in Parliament, we will push for the HDB to be more transparent about its redevelopment plans and how much money will be made from the redevelopment. But ultimately, we want you to control your lives. So we don't think that you should be 99-year serfs of the HDB. We want to give you the right to buy out your freeholds so that you too can benefit from the redevelopment of your estate. And we want to see that instead of the government threatening you by withholding upgrading if you vote for the opposition, you will determine whether your estate is redeveloped or not. So, going back to the local issues, I have in front of me a 5-year plan for West Coast GRC that we will be unveiling tomorrow at a press conference. And don't thank us. Don't say you are grateful. That will be our job. To 30 years ago, another man stood here. He also sought to normalize democracy. Maybe he didn't stand in this exact spot, but he stood 1 or 2 miles down the road in Anson. He wasn't out of step. He was a step ahead of his time. I have been accused of misquoting the PM. So let me read what he said. Your father sought by all means to demolish the PAP and our system of government. And this when his body was still just above ground at the wake. I'm not standing here for some kind of vendetta. I'm standing here because like him, like JBJ, like my father, I want to build Singapore and strengthen our government. It is that simple. 30 years ago, Anson was a groundbreaking and historic moment. My fellow Singaporeans, on May the 7th, 2011, I urge you to make another moment in history no one will ever forget. Vote for the Reform Party. Remember, West Coast GRC has 120,000 electors. I can see maybe 3,000 of you here tonight. So make sure when you leave here, you get 20 of your friends, colleagues, family living in West Coast to vote for us. Together, we're going to make history. Thank you very much.